Alien girl let the human support her broken step. Her confession at dusk carried the weight. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The storm rolled over the ridge like a sheet of violet smoke, brushing cold air against Ethan Cole's cheeks as he pushed through the rough terrain. The light at this hour, just before dusk, always looked unreal on this planet, a bruise-colored glow that clung to metal and skin. His boots crunched over the gritty slope, dust lifting in small silver clouds with each step. The wind carried a faint hum, a quiet vibration that only machines or alien storms could make, and it crawled across the surface of his jacket in tiny pulses. Ethan squinted toward the uneven ground ahead. Something had collapsed there, a slender figure, a shimmer of lavender skin reflecting the last sunbeams like watered silk. He moved closer, breath sharp in the cold, and saw her trying to push herself up on one elbow. Lyra Sivan, the alien girl from the survey team stationed half a mile from his outpost. Her right foot hovered at an odd angle, and when she tried to set it down, her face tightened. Not in fear, more in frustration, as if pain was just another inconvenience to be ignored. Ethan stepped closer, letting the wind swallow the sound of his boots. "Easy," he said quietly, his voice nearly carried away. She turned fast, silver pupils narrowing. For a moment he saw nothing but guarded pride in her eyes, the kind that didn't bend for anyone. "Human," she breathed, steadying herself on her hands. "I can stand." But when she lifted her foot again, the joint wobbled, a soft clicking sound echoing under the wind. She inhaled sharply, not quite a gasp, but enough for Ethan to understand the severity. He reached out a hand, palm open, fingers still from the cold and the caution. "Just let me help you balance." Lyra hesitated, her gaze fixed on his hand as though it were something fragile and unfamiliar. The storm thickened behind them, painting the horizon in deeper purple. Sand drifted around her ankles like tiny sparks. Finally, with a slow exhale, she placed her hand in his. Light at first, barely a touch, then firmer when her leg trembled again. Her skin was cool, smooth like polished stone warmed only by faint body heat beneath. Ethan steadied her, shifting his stance, letting her lean into his shoulder. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only their breaths mixed with the cold dusk air, forming little clouds that dissolved between them. Lyra's voice came softer than the wind. "Your kind always reaches out so easily, even when nothing is owed." Ethan kept his gaze ahead, guiding her weight gently. "You needed support. That's enough." She looked at him then, truly looked, as if measuring the quiet honesty in the way he braced himself for her. Her injured foot twitched, and she clutched his arm more firmly. The storm growled in the distance, but her voice dropped to a whisper shaped by something deeper than pain. "Ethan Cole, why does it feel lighter when you hold me like this?" The wind softened as Ethan guided Lyra along the narrow ridge, their steps slow and uneven, the fading light brushing everything in muted violet. Her grip on his arm steadied, though he could feel the subtle tremor in her injured foot each time it touched the ground. The storm behind them loosened its hold, leaving only a low hum in the air that vibrated through the rocks beneath their boots. Lyra's breath formed delicate wisps that vanished as soon as they touched the cooling air, and Ethan kept his stride patient, matching the rhythm of her careful movements. A shallow alcove appeared ahead, carved naturally into the rock face, its interior dim but warm enough to block the dusk wind. Ethan angled toward it, lowering his voice so it would not echo. "We can rest here for a minute." Lyra hesitated, then nodded, allowing him to help her sit on a flat stone surface. The stone carried the day's leftover warmth, a gentle contrast to the chill soaking the air. She drew her injured foot closer, watching the joint shift slightly under the skin with a tightened expression. Ethan crouched beside her without touching her yet, waiting for her signal. When her shoulders lowered a fraction, he reached for his field kit. The zipper sounded small against the silent world around them, and he pulled out a flexible support band and a portable light strip. He activated the strip, placing it beside them. A soft glow rose, casting their shadows long and blurred along the alcove walls. "Your kind uses simple tools," Lyra murmured, studying the band in his hands. "Yet they are steady." Ethan offered a small smile. Simple things tend to work when everything else does not. She watched his hands carefully as he wrapped the support around her ankle, slow and gentle, always checking her reaction. Her skin was cool beneath the bandage, almost metallic with its faint shimmer, and when his fingers brushed a tender point, she inhaled sharply but did not pull away. For a moment, she turned her face toward the opening of the alcove. The sky had shifted to deeper blue, the first stars pricking through like scattered silver pins. "Ethan," she said softly, the name shaping itself with care, "I did not expect someone like you to be here at the right moment." He adjusted the final loop of the bandage, securing the joint. "It was not the right moment," he said quietly. "It was just the moment when you needed someone." Lyra looked back at him, her silver eyes reflecting the dim light in a way that made them seem deeper than the sky behind her. "Where I come from, we are taught not to lean on others," she said. "We are taught that stepping wrong is weakness, that asking for support is a burden." Ethan sat beside her, their shoulders a breath apart, the warmth of the stone seeping through their clothes. "Maybe your teachings forgot something important," he said, resting his hands loosely on his knees. "Everyone steps wrong sometimes. What matters is that someone is willing to stand beside you when you do." Lyra lowered her gaze to her wrapped ankle, then slowly lifted her eyes to him again. The breeze outside carried the scent of distant mineral dust, clean and cool. "When you held me earlier," she said softly, "it felt as if the ground stopped shifting for just a moment." Ethan's voice tightened with an honesty he did not try to hide. "Then I am glad I was there to steady it." She exhaled, long and measured, as if releasing a weight she had carried far too long. The sky deepened further, and her voice dipped to a whisper. "I did not know humans could make a moment feel safe." The light inside the alcove dimmed further as dusk settled into its final colors, a deep violet blending with thin streaks of silver along the horizon. Ethan shifted slightly, careful not to disturb Lyra as she adjusted her weight on the warm stone. Her injured ankle rested securely within the support band, but he could still see the faint tension in her posture each time she moved it. A faint hum drifted through the air again, softer than before, like the planet exhaled when the storm settled. Lyra turned her head toward the sound, listening with that quiet focus her people were known for. "The wind has calmed," she said, her voice low. "It means we can move soon." Ethan glanced at the narrow path leading back toward the sensor outpost. It wound through shadowed ridges and uneven ground, a difficult route even without an injury. "We do not have to hurry," he said. "Your ankle needs time." She lifted her chin a little. "Time is not something I grant myself easily." Ethan smiled gently. "Maybe today is the exception." Lyra studied him for a moment, the soft glow from the light strip brushing across her face, catching the faint metallic shimmer in her skin. "Humans speak of exceptions as if they carry no weight," she murmured. "For my people, an exception is a declaration." Ethan let her words settle. They carried the same quiet gravity he had started to recognize in her, something shaped by discipline and expectation. Something heavy. She drew a slow breath, as if preparing to move, but winced slightly when her ankle shifted. Ethan raised a hand in a small, steadying gesture. "Lean on me when you stand," he said. "It will make it easier." Lyra hesitated, her gaze flickering briefly to his outstretched hand. "You offer support without hesitation," she said. "That is unusual for me." "Maybe it does not have to be unusual," Ethan replied. She looked away for a moment, toward the open sky where the first pale star pulsed above the distant ridge. "My people are taught to rise alone," she said. "To fall alone as well. There is honor in independence." Ethan let the silence sit for a heartbeat before answering. "There is also honor in accepting help when you need it." She turned back to him, her expression unreadable but softer around the edges, as if the words had landed somewhere deeper than she expected. A quiet hum passed between them, carried not by the wind, but by the faint warmth of being understood. Lyra shifted her injured foot again, testing her balance. Ethan moved closer, offering his arm once more. This time, she placed her hand upon it without hesitation. Her touch was steadier, though still cautious, and he adjusted his stance so that her weight could settle naturally. "Ethan," she said quietly, as if speaking the name anchored her. "Does your world teach you to trust so easily?" "Not easily," he said. "Just willingly." Her lips curved slightly, almost a smile, though gentler and more contemplative. "Willing trust," she repeated softly. "That is a rare thing." Together they rose, slow and measured, her hand tightening briefly as she found her footing. The alcove around them glowed faintly with the reflection of the deepening twilight, and the world felt still, like the quiet held its breath for them. Lyra looked up at him, her silver eyes reflecting the fading sky. "Ethan," she said again, her voice carrying a hint of something new, something delicate. "I think I am beginning to understand what it means to not stand alone." The night deepened into a cool indigo as Ethan and Lyra made their careful way out of the alcove, their steps slow but steadier than before. The storm had passed fully now, leaving the air unusually calm, the ground layered with a faint metallic dust that shimmered under the early starlight. Every few steps, Ethan felt Lyra's fingers adjust on his arm, not out of fear but to manage her balance, and he matched her pace without a word. The silence felt intentional, like the world itself sensed the fragile trust forming between them. When the ridge opened into a flatter stretch, Ethan paused to let her rest. She shifted her weight slowly, testing the strength of the support band, and released a steady exhale. "The pain is less," she admitted, lightly brushing her fingertips over the wrapped joint. "Your method of securing the bone is familiar, yet different from my people's technique." Ethan knelt beside her, giving her room but staying close enough to help if she needed him. "I just did what I could with what I had," he said. "Sometimes simple things hold better than complicated ones." Lyra's gaze softened as she studied him. "Your world values practicality. My world values precision. Yet somehow the two met here today." She tilted her head slightly, as if hearing something distant. Ethan waited, knowing she was attuned to sounds he could not perceive. When she relaxed again, he asked quietly, "Are you hearing anything concerning?" "No," she said. "Just the settling of the land after the storm. It sounds peaceful." They resumed walking, the path gently winding toward the outpost, which was still a considerable distance away. The temperature dropped steadily, and Ethan could feel the chill brushing the exposed skin of his hands. Without thinking twice, he shifted his arm and draped the insulated edge of his jacket closer to Lyra's shoulders. She stiffened slightly, more in surprise than discomfort, and looked at him. "You are cold," she said. "You should keep your warmth." "I am fine," Ethan replied with a small smile. "The jacket is built for nights like this. Besides, you need it more right now." She studied him as if trying to understand the logic behind giving away something essential. "Humans are unusual," she murmured. "You choose to give up comfort so easily." "It is not giving up," he said. "It is sharing." Lyra walked a few more steps before speaking again, her voice quieter. "In my culture, sharing warmth is a symbol of trust," she said. "It means you accept the presence of another as something that steadies you." Ethan slowed, absorbing the weight of her words. "Then I am glad you do not mind." She looked ahead toward the distant ridge, but her hand tightened on his arm, a deliberate motion rather than instinct. The gesture carried a soft, unspoken meaning that hovered between them in the cold air. The land shifted subtly under their boots as they crossed a patch of fractured stone. Lyra stumbled slightly, catching herself quickly, but Ethan steadied her anyway. When she looked up at him, her expression held no embarrassment, only acknowledgement. "Ethan," she said softly, "I am beginning to understand why your people say that accepting help does not make you weak." "What does it make you then?" he asked. She took a slow breath, her silver eyes reflecting the quiet starlight. "It makes you connected," she said. "And perhaps that is its own strength." The starlight spread across the open terrain in soft threads of silver as Ethan and Lyra continued their slow progress toward the outpost, the silence between them warm rather than empty. The wind had settled fully, leaving only the faint whisper of dust shifting under their boots. Every few steps, Lyra adjusted her footing carefully, her injured ankle held steady within the support band that Ethan had wrapped earlier. Despite the pain that still lingered, her posture carried a quiet determination, softened now by the presence of the human beside her. The ridge ahead descended into a shallow basin, dotted with low mineral formations shaped by centuries of storms. Ethan guided them toward a wide flat rock where they could pause again without straining her injury. Lyra sat with a controlled exhale, her hand still loosely resting on his arm for balance before she let go. The cold air brushed their faces with gentle strokes, and the sky above them was a deep velvet blue scattered with stars that flickered like distant signals. She tilted her head upward, watching them with an expression Ethan had not seen before, something almost contemplative. "Your stars are quieter than ours," she murmured. "They do not pulse with sound the way mine do." Ethan settled beside her, close but not crowding her. "Do they sing?" he asked. She considered this. "In a way, their frequencies are stronger on our world. It makes the sky feel alive." Ethan looked up at the silent expanse above them. "I think I would like that. It can be overwhelming," she said softly, "but comforting too. It reminds us that we are part of something immense." She lowered her gaze from the stars and studied him with a gentler focus. "Humans look at the universe differently. You search for meaning in the quiet." Ethan smiled, a small curve of warmth. "And you hear meaning in the noise?" "Perhaps," she said. "Or perhaps we simply listen for different things." Another breeze drifted past them, carrying a faint metallic scent from the mineral formations. Lyra shifted her injured ankle slightly, testing the support. Ethan noticed the subtle change in her expression. "Does it hurt more?" he asked. "Only when I twist it," she said. "The band helps." "Your technique? It makes the joint feel secure." Ethan nodded. "We will take our time going back. There is no rush." Lyra glanced toward the dark ridge that shielded the distant outpost from view. "My people would rush," she said. "They would push through the pain to prove resilience." "Pain does not measure strength," Ethan replied gently. "Courage does." Lyra looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting a soft glimmer from the starlight. "You speak as if you believe that." "I do," he said. "And you have shown it. You trusted me when you did not have to." She held his gaze for several heartbeats, her expression unreadable but calm. Then she spoke quietly. "Trust does not come easily to me. But tonight, it feels less like a risk." Ethan felt the weight of those words settle into the cold air between them, warm and steady. She drew a slow breath, then shifted closer, not leaning on him for support this time, but simply choosing proximity. "Ethan," she said softly, "the moment you held me steady, something inside me shifted. Not in fear, not in doubt, in recognition." He turned slightly toward her. "Recognition of what?" Lyra's gaze dropped to the ground before rising again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Recognition that being understood can feel safe." The basin stretched out before them in soft slopes of silver dust, the starlight gliding over the landscape like a quiet breath. Ethan rose first, offering his arm to Lyra as she shifted her weight, carefully testing her ankle before standing fully. She accepted his support without hesitation now, her fingers curling around his arm with a steadiness that was becoming familiar. The night air had cooled further, carrying a faint crispness that hinted at the planet's late hours. They began moving again, their pace slow but intentional, each step placed with quiet coordination. The ground here was smoother, shaped by years of wind polishing the mineral-rich earth into gentle contours. As they walked, Lyra's gaze drifted across the dark horizon. "Your world," she said softly, "teaches partnership in a way mine does not." Ethan glanced at her. "How do you mean?" She inhaled carefully, the cool air rising in a thin cloud. "Where I come from, we are expected to depend on our own strength. We do not show strain. We do not reveal uncertainty. Even in injury, we stand alone so that no one questions our resolve." Ethan guided her around a narrow outcrop, his hand steady, near her back to prevent her from losing balance on the uneven ground. "That sounds like a heavy way to live." "It is," she admitted. "But it is the way our lineage has shaped us. Connection is seen as distraction, vulnerability as exposure." Ethan nodded slowly. "Maybe vulnerability is just another way of showing courage." Lyra looked at him with an expression somewhere between curiosity and quiet wonder. "Your people say that often." "We do," Ethan said. "But we say it because we believe it." They continued forward, the outpost still hidden beyond the ridge, but inching closer with each careful step. A soft mist of dust lifted around their boots, catching the starlight in faint glimmers. Lyra shifted her grip slightly, not out of pain, but to adjust to the rhythm of their shared stride. "Ethan," she said after a long moment, When you first reached for me, I felt something I did not recognize. Ethan waited, letting her speak at her own pace. It was not fear, she said. It was not resistance. It was something softer, something that made me pause. Ethan's voice remained gentle. Do you know what it was? She exhaled slowly, the sound almost like a quiet admission. Trust, she said. It was trust, even though I did not understand it at the time. They reached a gentle rise in the terrain, and Ethan steadied her as they climbed. When they reached the top, the valley behind them spread out in a shimmering blanket of starlit dust. Lyra paused to catch her breath, leaning lightly against him. Your presence, she said quietly, makes uncertainty feel less sharp. Ethan felt the words settle deep inside the moment. You make that easy, he replied. Lyra turned her silver eyes toward him, reflecting the soft glow of the sky. I never thought a human would be the one to teach me this, she whispered. That standing with someone can be stronger than standing alone. The ridge sloped downward into a narrow valley where the ground shimmered with a pale glow, the minerals beneath the surface absorbing starlight and releasing it in soft pulses that looked almost like breathing. Ethan guided Lyra carefully along the descending path, each step steady and measured. Her injured ankle responded better now, though he could still feel the faint tremor of strain through her grip when the terrain shifted beneath them. The air grew cooler, brushing against their faces with a crispness that hinted at the planet's night cycle deepening. Not far ahead, a thin layer of mist drifted low across the ground, moving in slow waves that curled around their boots as they walked. It was harmless, Ethan knew, but dense enough to obscure small dips and rises in the terrain. He kept his pace slow, mindful of every step. Lyra's voice broke the quiet gently. We are close, are we not? Yes, Ethan said. Once we cross this valley, the outpost should be just beyond the ridge. She nodded, her breath forming a thin cloud in the cold air. Good. My strength is holding, but I can feel the limits approaching. Ethan adjusted his arm subtly to give her more support. We will stop if you need to. Not yet, she said softly. I want to reach the ridge. They moved through the mist together, the ground faintly textured beneath them, the cool air filling the space with a kind of suspended calm. But as they reached the midpoint of the valley, the soil beneath Ethan's foot shifted slightly. It was not dangerous, just a reminder of how loosely the mineral layers settled after storms. He steadied himself quickly, tightening his hold so Lyra would not lose her balance. She paused, her breath catching for a moment. Is the ground stable? She asked. Mostly, Ethan said honestly. It is just the surface dust moving. Nothing to worry about. She looked down at her feet, then back up at him. It is strange, she murmured. I feel no fear with you here. Ethan felt the weight of the moment settle gently between them. You do not need to fear, he said. You are not alone. Lyra's gaze softened, her silver eyes reflecting the dim pulses of light beneath the ground. In my culture, relying on another is considered a divergence from strength. But tonight, she paused, letting the sentence drift on the cool air. Tonight it feels different. A faint trembling motion rippled through the mist then, not from anything dangerous, but from the cooling minerals contracting beneath the soil. Ethan felt the slight vibration beneath his boots and braced himself. He kept his arm firm around Lyra's back, steadying her through the subtle shift. She looked up at him, her expression filled with a quiet seriousness. Your presence anchors me, she said softly. More than I expected. Ethan met her gaze, the cold air carrying their words more gently than the breeze. You anchor yourself, he said. I am only here to help you stand while you do it. Lyra held his eyes for several long heartbeats, the mist curling around them like a soft veil. Ethan, she whispered. Perhaps strength was never meant to be carried alone. The mist thinned as Ethan and Lyra approached the far end of the valley, the starlight growing sharper as the ground lifted gently beneath their boots. The ridge ahead curved upward in a soft arc, its surface reflecting muted silver tones that flickered with every shift of the night breeze. Lyra leaned a little more heavily on Ethan as they climbed, her injured ankle protesting the incline, but her movements remained steady with his support. The silence between them had changed since the valley, carrying a quiet depth that felt almost deliberate, as if every shared breath added another thread to the fragile connection forming between them. When they reached the top of the ridge, the outpost finally came into view. A faint glow from the perimeter lights traced a subtle outline against the dark horizon, barely visible but unmistakably there. Lyra paused at the crest, catching her breath as she stared at the distant structure. "We are closer than I expected," she said softly. "It feels almost unreal after the long walk." Ethan steadied her as she shifted her weight. "We made good progress," he said. "You have been strong through all of it." Lyra's gaze drifted to him, her silver eyes reflecting the small lights ahead. "Not strong alone," she replied. "Strength shared feels different." They remained there for a moment, the air cool around them, the ground beneath their feet humming softly with the planet's natural vibrations. Ethan noticed the way Lyra's shoulders relaxed, as if reaching the crest lifted more than just physical strain. With the path ahead now smoother, Ethan adjusted his stance so she could lean on him more comfortably as they began the descent toward the outpost. The minerals in the soil glowed faintly beneath their steps, forming tiny arcs of light at each footfall. Lyra's voice came quietly, almost as though she was thinking aloud. "My people teach that revealing too much of oneself can shift the balance of power. It is not considered wise." Ethan kept his pace even. "Do you feel you have revealed too much tonight?" She shook her head slowly. "No. For the first time, it feels like balance could mean something other than superiority. Something like understanding." Ethan listened, the rhythm of their steps matching the gentle pulse of the ground. "Understanding is its own kind of strength," he said. "It does not take anything away from you." Lyra looked forward again, the lights of the outpost becoming clearer. "When I hesitated earlier in the valley," she said, "I realized the hesitation was not from fear. It came from recognizing how easily I had come to rely on you." Ethan felt her grip tighten slightly. "It is natural to rely on someone when trust is there," he said softly. She was quiet for several heartbeats. Then her voice lowered. "Trust is rare among my people. Rarer still for someone of my rank." Ethan turned his head slightly, sensing a shift in her tone. "Your rank." Lyra exhaled, the sound tinged with something like acceptance. "I did not intend to conceal it. I simply did not think it mattered tonight. But you should know, I am not merely a member of a survey team. I am the daughter of our sector's ruling line." Ethan absorbed the words without stopping. "So you are royalty." Lyra's gaze fixed on the outpost lights. "By blood, yes. But tonight, I did not want to be seen as a title." Her voice softened further. "I wanted to be seen as someone who could take your hand without consequence." The quiet that followed held more meaning than anything spoken, stretching gently across the ridge as they continued toward the faint glow ahead. Ethan looked at her, his voice steady. "Lyra, you are more than a title. Anyone could see that." She met his eyes with a soft, vulnerable stillness. "And you, Ethan, are more than a human who offered support. You are the first person I have ever allowed to walk beside me without duty binding us." The ridge wind stirred lightly around them, carrying her words into the night. "That," she whispered, "is my truth." The descent from the ridge carried a quiet stillness, the kind that settles only when the hardest part of the journey has passed. The outpost lights grew clearer with each careful step, their soft glow stretching across the ground like a path meant just for them. Lyra leaned into Ethan's support, not out of weakness, but with a sense of ease that had not existed earlier in the night. Her injured ankle responded better now, though the strain still showed in the way she inhaled whenever the slope shifted. The cool night air brushed against them, carrying a faint mineral scent that seemed to deepen the silence around their movements. As they reached the flatter stretch near the perimeter, Lyra slowed, her gaze fixed on the shimmer of light ahead. "We made it," she murmured, her voice threaded with relief and something gentler. Ethan steadied her as she placed more weight on her good foot. "You did it," he said. "You pushed through more than most could." She turned her head toward him, her silver eyes catching the faint glow of the outpost lamps. "I did not do it alone," she replied softly. The lights brightened as they approached, illuminating the dust on their boots and the subtle shimmer of Lyra's lavender skin. Ethan could feel her grip relax as the safety of the outpost drew nearer. Yet she did not step away. Instead, she paused just before crossing the last stretch, letting the moment settle between them. "Ethan," she said quietly, "before we reach the others, there is something I must say." He waited, the cool air filling the silence. Lyra's voice carried the calm weight of someone speaking a truth long held in careful restraint. Tonight, when you offered your hand, I felt a clarity I have never known. Not from duty, not from expectation, but from trust freely given. She shifted slightly to face him more fully, her fingers still resting gently along his arm. My title has always been a boundary, she continued. A reminder that closeness comes at a cost. But with you, there was no cost. Only quiet understanding. Ethan felt his breath settle into the stillness. You are not defined by your title, he said softly. Not to me. Lyra's eyes softened, the silver in them deepening like quiet starlight. That is why I must speak this truth before we enter the lights. She drew a slow breath, steady and full. Ethan Cole, when you stood beside me tonight, I felt seen in a way I did not think possible. Not as a daughter of a ruling line, not as a figure of rank, but as someone who could lean on another without losing herself. Her voice lowered to a tender whisper. You became my balance when the ground shifted, and because of that, I am no longer afraid to let someone stand close. Ethan did not answer right away. He simply met her gaze, letting the meaning pass between them without interruption. The quiet carried more truth than any words could. Lyra stepped the final inch closer, closing the space between their shadows. Whatever tomorrow brings, she whispered, this night will remain. The night I learned that strength shared is not weakness, but belonging. The outpost lights flickered softly across her face, reflecting a calm certainty. She held his gaze 1 second longer. Then, without another word, she let the silence complete the moment, a silence filled with understanding that would echo long after the night faded.